Welcome. I'm Melva Persico. Come with me, meet new people, and share their experiences as we take our culture to the world. And today I have a special guest, my cousin, Sharon Glasgow. So, welcome, Sharon. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Hello, like Melva said, I am Sharon Glasgow. I was born in Guyana, South America, in New Amsterdam to be exact. And I currently live in the United States. But I did teach for a few years in Botswana in 1999 to 2001. So today I am happy to share my experiences with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. And notice when Sharon came on, I was like, wow, you're representing Guyana. For those who don't know, we have the Guyana flag behind her, and her earrings are shaped like the map of Guyana and in the colors of the Guyanese flag. So she's Guyanese to the bone, as we say.
Thank you.
So, okay, Sharon. So you lived in Botswana, as you mentioned, for about 3 years. Why did you end up living in Botswana?
Well, back in Guyana, I was a trained teacher. And some of the things I like to do were not only teaching, but extending myself into my community in terms of sharing and imparting my knowledge. So we got, in my country, word of mouth is a thing that catches. So someone mentioned, oh, they're going to Botswana to teach. And I thought of it for a minute. And first thing you think, going to Africa? I don't think so. But once we did the research, we found out that Botswana was a pretty young country, similar to Guyana, because we got our independence in the same year. And so my motivation was, this is an opportunity for me to build a nest egg and give my son an opportunity to see another part of the world. Mm-hmm. So I was willing to put that at risk and at the same time, try to improve the quality of my life. So I took the opportunity to become a contractual teacher and teach in Botswana for 3 years.
Yes. So when you got there, as you said, Africa, Southern Africa, what were your first impressions of the people and their culture? And were there any culture shock experiences?
Wow, that's a lovely question, Malva. Certainly there were culture shock experiences because the way we interact is similar, but the way they dress traditionally was like a shock to us. So on our first visit, well, traditionally, you expect certain things in an African culture. But then when we got there, it was more like what we are accustomed to in Guyana. So they took us to a hotel. We stayed there for a few days and we thought, oh, this is so nice. That was the life. No, when you got into the wards or the communities, because we were all separated into different sections of the country. So when you got there, then you saw what the rural life was like, what the ethnic life was like. And that was a real cultural shock. And so one of the neighbors came to the door to greet us and she was dressed in the traditional garb. The entire top was empty, bare, and then she wore the branches at the bottom. And then we found out that the tradition there was that you're not supposed to be shocked when you see that. So that took a little bit off of us. And then we had to learn how to accept that as the culture. However, when they are doing everyday things, they dress, in a traditional way in some cases, and then they dress the way we dress, like wearing a t-shirt or wearing the African wraps and things like those. So we got that cultural shock. When we looked at some of the foods they ate, they were similar to what we ate, but at a different level. There used to be a big communal pot. So you'll have like a big pot that everybody will eat from, and you will go over and you share from the pot. But the foods were cooked slightly differently, and that was shocking to us.
Okay. So tell me, I need a little bit of detail there. When you say, so this cooking in a communal pot, was this every day or for special occasions?
In some cases, special occasions. If you lived like in the city, Gaborone was the capital city. But if you lived in an area that is more remote, then the communal cooking is what they did. So they would cook out in the yard. The whole thing is that they lived in like little huts. Mm-hmm. So they would go away Well, in some cases, all right, so basically, Botswana people have lots of cattle. And if you have a lot of cattle, it tells the ordinary person that you are wealthy.
Right.
And so you may live in the city, like on weekdays or for business, you use the English language and you use the mother tongue, which is Setswana, for, talking to the people who belong there. And then you will travel to your remote area on weekends. So when you're in the remote area, they will cook in these big pots out in the yard. And then everybody will go over and eat from the pots. When they have ceremonial functions, like if there's a funeral or a wedding, they also cook in the communal way. For the funerals, we noticed that there was this special dish called serobe. And let me tell you, serobe is Guyanese cow belly.
Okay.
And it was
so this
cooked.
is like the intestines.
Yes.
Okay.
Offal. That's the correct nutritional name for it. So the intestines, whether it was the, what do we call tripe? Those of you who are from Guyana would know tripe. So they would cook all of that in the big pot. So they will slaughter the cow or kill the cow, and they don't throw away any parts. And so when it's a funeral, they will do that. Similar to what we do in Guyana, we will, kill an animal to celebrate. And then they cook that. And as they're cooking, they will boil it. So when they're clapping and singing and doing all the cultural things that they do and dancing, the pot is cooking. And then they will go over, the elders will pour the water out and put fresh water. So when they cook this animal, they took out the middle of the cow or the intestines with the feces in it. And they pour that off and they pour that off. So that smell is like, it stays with the tribe. And then when you eat it, you get some of the fat. They don't necessarily turn it outside like we do back home and scrape it and all of that. So that was kind of a lesson for us.
Okay.
So we learned that.
I can imagine.
If I could extend that a little bit, Melva, we also learned that if they offer you that food, it is disrespectful for you to refuse. So you must accept, you put both hands to accept if you're taking it from an elder, and you taste it. At least you must taste it. If you say, no, thank you, or you make any untoward movement, they would think it's a mark of disrespect. So we learned that.
Wow.
Yes.
Very different. And just, what about, you said some of the foods what were some foods that were similar, but maybe prepared differently? Apart from the tribe, was there anything else that was kind of similar to what we prepare in Guyana?
Cornmeal.
Okay.
Yes. And we said to them, we have yellow cornmeal. And they said, yellow cornmeal? We only use that when it was the time of the famine. So they were associating the yellow cornmeal with the time when they had nothing to eat and America sent them that cornmeal. The one they used was called papa or pap. So they boiled it. We will boil cornmeal and it would be soft. They boiled it until it became a stiff paste. And that was their staple. So for every main meal that they used, you will get like a handful of pap, and they eat with their fingers. So they would come to you with the bowl of warm water. You wash your hands. They bring a towel, you dry your hand, and the person serving you, because I was considered an elder because I was an adult and I was a teacher in the community, they would bow to you. And after they go away with the water, then they bring you the food on the plate. You will always have a set of pap, and you will get either some vegetables or a root, like beetroot or one of those, or butternut squash. And then they give you meat, always meat. If it's chicken, they may probably strip it. If it's beef, you get a good handful of beef. And they always serve you with milk sometimes. Yes.
Yes, I heard somebody talking recently about an experience in I think it was South Africa. And they did mention something about the cornmeal, and they said for them, the way it was prepared, it was similar to, it reminded them of the cuckoo that they make in Barbados. So maybe it was kind of something similar, how they the pop. Yes. Wow. Yes. So you mentioned some similar, some kind of little things, that similarities and differences. Was there anything else relating to similarities and differences that you wanted to expand on?
Well, the Botswana people, as they're called, the people of Botswana, we found out that they worked together. They were very united in everything that they did. And we thought that we should adapt that. We are kind of united because we have 6 races, but I don't think we have that togetherness, that stick-to-itness that we saw with them. We are kind of lacking a little bit, and they are extremely polite. Like I mentioned, if they are coming to an adult, if you give them something with one hand, the adult or the elder will rebuke. If they give it to you with one hand, the elder would rebuke them because they have to put both hands, either the one hand cupping or the two together, and then they will bow. And one other thing they would do is hold your hand by the elbow. So if you're giving with one hand, you must support the other hand. And we found that that was interesting. So we used to look at each other, and then bit by bit, our children started doing some of the practices that they were, learning, because of course we were living there, and they encouraged us to practice it. So that was one thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking it seems so symbolic as you talk about the unity, this thing about, one hand supporting the other, hand supporting the elbow. It seems very symbolic of that kind of unity and togetherness and support that was evident among the people.
Yeah. Wow. Their music and their dance were like very important to them. They celebrated everything with music and dance. And we also noticed that poetry was part of, their tradition. Like when they have big events, poetry always would be part of what they, like to call important. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so how, as you mentioned, eventually you, even though things may have seemed strange at first, eventually you started adapting to some of the practices. How was that? How was that for you, being adapting to these practices that have seemed so strange and foreign when you got there at first?
At first you felt a little out of place, but they would invite you first to church, and then they invite you to the functions, and they would allow you to do some of the things with them so that you don't feel, completely different. First, when you told them where you were from, you say Guyana, and they were like, oh, Guyana? Are you from Ghana? So they started relating us to people that we look like in their, in their African diaspora or whatever. But then I said, no, we are from South America. And then one elder said to me, and I remember this clearly, you are a Black American. I said, no, I am from Guyana. He said, no, South America? Then you are a Black American. But then geographically, they didn't know who we were. They wanted to know why we were there and things like that.
Yeah, before you continue, I spoke to someone who lived in and worked in East Africa. Okay. And she was telling me something similar. And she said, whereas the West Africans knew of those of us in the Caribbean, from the diaspora,
right?
The East Africans didn't, and they thought, yes, like you said, that maybe you from the United States. Yes, like they seem to only know about those who went to the United States and not others who went to other parts of the world. Anyway, sorry, I kind of cut you to mention that point. Yeah, go ahead. You were talking about how you adapted.
Yeah. And so, our kids were like quick to be catchy. I remember when we lived in Orapa, which was like 6 hours drive from the capital. And there was a Zambian family there, and they had all boys. And so my son, they came over to welcome us, because when you get there, you feel totally strange. I think my principal at the time was an Indian man. He was from one of the smaller islands, Mauritius, out there in the
Indian Ocean.
And he said, there's a Zambian family and they're going to come over to see you. So when we saw people that were similar to us, they just embraced us like, they had the accent and everything, the African accent, but we felt warm. And my son started playing with them, and I could still see that image in my head vividly. And it was easier. I felt like he was adapting quicker to the culture.
You can see
because they were playing together. They found that they had things like similarities. And then I enrolled him in the same school. So they quickly became friends. And he was practicing the language.
Oh, yes.
So it was mandatory that they learned that as part of it was an English school because it was run by the South Africans. First of all, the area where we lived is where they had the diamonds. And so it was a restricted area. We had to have a pass to go in. And if you were going to get visitors, you had to leave their names at the gate. And so it was like a gated community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that he was benefiting a little more. They were swimming on the, what we call the timetable and the schedule, and a wide range of other subjects that I think he would not have learned in Guyana. He would not have learned swimming if he had gone to school where I grew up, and he would not have learned Setswana. And there was world history and some other, other subjects. So I thought it was beneficial to him, and he adapted better than I thought he would.
Mm-hmm.
So that part I admired and appreciated.
Yeah, sometimes the children, and especially because he had friends, that worked out very well for him.
Yes.
Now, as you said, they didn't really know anything about us, so they wouldn't have had any stereotypes. But did you, I remember you said at first that you didn't really know too much, but then you did some research and so on.
Yes.
But were there any stereotypes that maybe you had heard of, or maybe things that you had in mind that when you actually got there, and interacting with the people, you were able to dispel?
Yes. The main one was the stigma of HIV, because it was the late 90s. And I think some of the people in that part of the hemisphere were affected by HIV/AIDS. And so we heard all these stories about, oh, y'all gonna catch the virus and the people falling down on the street and things like that. But of course, we had a liaison person, and, we believed and trusted his information, and it was not the truth. So we took a chance and said, yes, we're going to go. And when we got there, it was totally different. And that, I was happy, was very reassuring. So that was dispelled pretty much as we got there. The other thing that we had heard is that the people lived in trees. Unbelievable.
I can't believe that in the 20th century. 20th to 21st century, you're still hearing that.
And so we said, okay, then we will live in trees too. And it was totally different. We learned that they got their independence the same year with us, and the development was great. It was, an economy that was thriving, and that was one of the main attractions for us, wanting to go there to build our nest egg and get a better quality of life.
Yes. I find that very funny. So while you were there, did you have any opportunities to share Guyanese culture with the people in Botswana?
Definitely. Well, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I just said teacher, but I used to be a home economics teacher back home. And so when I went to Botswana as a home economics teacher, and so on the weekends, they would come by my house. I would make rice, I would make buns, and I would make pastry. And those seem to be things that they can relate to. When we did the cook-up rice, we would put like different meat in it, because they used to have like a variety of foods available, not only traditional foods, but foods that we were accustomed to. You'd go to, there was a supermarket called Spar, and they would have a wide variety. So we can choose what we wanted. And when I made those foods, they would go, if you went to the church the following day, they would sing praises to you for inviting you over and telling them, that she has this skill and she's willing to share with us, and they would applaud you for that. So I got a chance to really show my skill. I remember when there was a wedding in one village, someone asked me if I know about weddings, and I said yes. So I introduced them to our fruit cake. I made a small one, and they shared it at the wedding. The following wedding, I made the bride's cake because they felt that it was something that they can incorporate into their culture. Yeah, they would make a fruit cake. It looked kind of brown because they didn't add any caramel or anything. And then they realized that they can get all of those other things at the supermarket. So it wasn't a traditional cake anymore. It was what they call an American cake. They called it, this is the American cake.
Which of course is not the American cake. Guyanese cake. Yes.
But it brought me great joy because, I've seen that how well they work together, and that was easy to catch on. So we blended in very nicely for the time that we were there.
Yes, that's good. That's good. Yeah. And now, what impressions have remained with you, having lived and worked in Botswana What are some impressions that have stayed with you?
Wow. One major impression is that life was easygoing in Botswana. Easygoing in the sense that the people weren't very fussy. They were pretty simple people. They would work and then they would go to the farms. I learned while I was there that they were forced by the government to do farming, which turned out to be beneficial to them because the men would go away to work. And when they come back, this was another culture shock. They would just, think that the time when they come back, it's time to relax. And then the women had to do all of the hard work. So they would tie the babies in a little, that cloth thing on the back.
Right.
And they would take the axe, they go out, make the firewood, come in, make the pots. So the women were pretty much the homemakers. And I am not sure, why they had a shortage of teachers at the time when we went, but I was happy for the opportunity to serve in that country. I learned quite a few lessons. And so one of the big impressions I got is that my place in the world as a woman is very significant. Mm-hmm. And I had a greater appreciation for, womankind when I saw what the women of Botswana had to go through. Mm-hmm. So that stuck with me.
And were there, now you lived in Botswana, right now you're living in the United States.
Yes.
What lessons have you, in living in these two places? Or are there any lessons that you've learned from living abroad?
Yes, I've learned that diversity is very worldly. And it's just like the world now is a big tapestry. So some of the things I learned in Botswana, I was able to bring with me to America. It's a different culture in America. So I had to adapt a little bit. I had to change my mode of operating. I had to change some of my teaching strategies. But I think it has made me into a better person. I think that all of the interweaving of the cultures and the value system here and what I've learned from my own home country, is helping to make me into a better person. Even though I'm at this age, I'm still learning, and I really appreciate culture for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, we continue learn. As we live, we learn.
Yes.
So what you mentioned, appreciating cultures. And so as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts on the importance of appreciating other cultures?
Well, I was happy when I got the opportunity to become an expatriate teacher. That was like a feather in my cap when I left Guyana. And so the appreciation of culture seems to be like this big thing in my heart, where that appreciation has helped me to understand people. And in my opinion, it's making the world a better place. Other people got a peek into my Afro-Guyanese upbringing, and I was able to share that. My son got an opportunity to learn lessons, which I hope will take him through the rest of his life. And I just firmly believe that it has benefited all of us in improving our quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much. Well said. And thank you, Sharon, for being with me today, for sharing with our viewers your rich experiences. And I thanks to the viewers for watching. And we're going to see you soon as we meet new people and learn from their experiences in our next episode of Our Culture to the World.
Thank you, Melva. My pleasure.